Welcome to Whiskey Cast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 941 for April 14th, 2022, featuring our Happy Hour live webcast from the other night. Rachel McCormack joined me for a whiskey and artisan chocolate pairing session, and I learned a few things about chocolate that night. I'd always known that whiskeys and chocolate go well together, but my taste in chocolate was pretty pedestrian until now, compared to my taste in whiskey. Thanks, as always, to the presenting sponsors of Whiskey Cast, Redbreast and Dewar's. They make the live shows possible each week. I also want to thank our segment sponsors on each week's Whiskey Cast podcast, Scarabaeus, Catoctin Creek, Mortlock, Writer's Tears, Sagamore Spirit, and the Delmore. On that note, next week's webcast will be live from the Nth, the Universal Whiskey Experience in Las Vegas, and the Delmore's Richard Patterson and Craig Bridger will be my guests. Now, let's taste some whiskeys and chocolate. Easter and chocolate go together about as well as, chocolate and whiskey, chocolate and anything. And so I have a bunch of chocolates here that came courtesy of our guest, Rachel McCormack, and the kind folks at CocoRunners.com. Rachel, of course, is an Iowa-based whiskey educator, but you also do a lot of stuff with chocolates too, right, Rachel?
Yes, I do. I'm not based on Islay. I'm based on the mainland of Scotland.
I stand corrected.
And no, it's no problem at all. I would love to be based on Islay, but I have to live somewhere nearer to few more shops and a bit more of a city. I wrote a book called Chasing the Dram, which was about going around Scotland, mostly drinking in distilleries and then writing about learning about the whiskey in distilleries. So it was a really hard, terrible job to do, going around Scotland, drinking in distilleries and then writing about it. And then recently I've started this project working with Cocoa Runners to try and get whiskey people who really like whiskey, which is all of you, to get them into craft chocolate, because I think there's something really whiskey and craft chocolate have in common. And I think whiskey drinkers are kind of missing a trick that they could really do with getting themselves into craft chocolate. Now,
I've always thought that whiskey worked well with regular chocolate, not the craft chocolate, but I'm just going to come right out and admit it. My secret love is Cadbury's Dairy Milk, the good UK ones, not the crappy ones they make over here in the US under license, but the good Dairy Milk bars from the UK that I get when I go to the UK and Ireland last week. And I'll admit I brought a couple home in my bag from Ireland last week. But what is the difference between...
Okay, so you know...
Go ahead.
So you know how when you were very young and you thought that really cheap vodka was the best thing in the world to drink?
I never thought that, but okay, I'll get your...
Well, what was your entry level? What was the very first thing that you drank that you thought, oh, I'm the bee's knees, I can drink this, and actually you wouldn't drink it anymore, ever?
Probably some rum.
You used to. Was it bad rum that you used to drink when you were young?
Yeah, it was a bad rum that I started out on when I was just turning 21. I got some bad rum. So this is like, Dairy Milk is like bad rum.
So Dairy Milk is kind of like bad rum compared to really, really good top quality rum or really good whiskey. That's, that to me would be the difference. The thing about craft chocolate is that it's kind of the total diametric. It's exactly. Dairy Milk is not top tier chocolate, Spirit Bomb. I agree with you. You're about to see what is top tier chocolate. So the difference between kind of commodity chocolate, these things are made like in a you kind of massive factory. They've got lots of different ingredients. They're made, the cocoa that they buy in, there's no really thought or care given into actually the varieties of cocoa, the type of bean, the taste of the bean. And the craft chocolate makers, they buy very directly from very specific farms, and the farms are given normally between 3 to 10 times more amount of money they normally get for producing cocoa, which means that they can do it properly, they can feed their children, they can educate their children. And these small companies, they buy the beans and they roast the beans themselves and they temper the beans themselves and then they add any ingredients, which is normally just sugar and possibly some. I think you've got one chocolate that you're having which has got some other ingredients in it, but not very many. They're very obvious. And these small producers then make these chocolates and they like sea salt or chocolate mix, and they sell them on the market. So what Cocoa Runners does, Cocoa Runners buys in craft chocolate from around the world and they sell it online in their online shop. Now, one of the things, Cocoa Runners is the biggest craft chocolate seller in the whole world. If you compare it to whiskey sellers in the UK, I would probably say it's like the chocolate equivalent of the Whiskey Exchange, which is the biggest online shop of whiskey in the world. The thing with Cocoa Runners, though, they have 3 employees. So, the Whiskey Exchange is a lot more than 3 employees, and also you can get whiskey in a lot more places than just the Whiskey Exchange. So the craft chocolate industry is much, much smaller. And I think that it would just be a really good thing, I think, for whiskey drinkers to get into craft chocolate. Now, someone there said that they were worried about their bank account. They were like, oh my God, this is all I need, another craft thing to get into. I can tell you, it's a lot cheaper than good whiskey. When you can pay £100,000 or like $150,000 for the very top range of whiskey that you can find to invest in, a craft chocolate bar is not something you would invest in. The most expensive one I think that Cocoa Runners has is about £10, which is maybe $12 or $13. So, it's a luxury product, but it's a much cheaper luxury product than whiskey.
That's Grumpy gripes about everything. And our pal Chris Ratcliffe points out that when you start getting into single estate chocolates, the complexity and flavors are astonishing. The Rabbit Estate ones were a shock for him. And I suspect that these are going to be a shock for me as well, because we have everything from single province organic chocolate to a vegan chocolate and 75% Forastero cocoa from Brazil. Where do you think we ought to start here?
Well, you like dairy milk, don't you? So you want a milk chocolate to start.
So we have this milk, Duffy's Milk Corazon del Ecuador, 43%. Should we start with here?
So that's a 40. Yep. So that's only got 43% cocoa, and then it'll have some milk powder and some sugar. And they're a company in England, and they buy in their beans. They'll have bought their beans directly from that farm in Ecuador. So what you do when you're having expensive chocolate, it's like the difference between having a shot of really bad rum, or I was a teenage. Well, we could drink when we were 18. So me in pubs at 18, I used to have flaming Zambucas. I do not know if anybody knows what they were. If you are over the age of 25, you should not be drinking flaming Zambucas. They are as bad as they sound. So what you have to do is when you're having this, it just imagine dairy milk, and imagine you would normally just open a bar of dairy milk and shove it in your mouth. What you want to do is break this chocolate by your ear, and you should hear that it's got a good snap.
Yep.
And then what you want to put a tiny bit in your mouth, don't put a big bit in your mouth, and then just let it melt. And you should see what kind of flavours that you're getting in that chocolate. If you want to show people the flavour wave, Cocoa Runners developed with a wine expert and a philosopher who does a lot of flavour and taste. They developed this chocolate tasting wave so that you could see the difference between one chocolate and another. What you get with it's kind of similar to tasting whiskey, to be honest. So you get like what the texture is and the melt, and then what the taste and the flavour is, and then what the aftertaste is, which in a lot of ways is really similar to drinking whiskey. But you can see from the list of flavours, list of textures, and what kind of texture you're getting in that, Mark.
I'm getting a combination of creamy and waxy in this one, I think. And then step 2, moving to the taste and flavor. I'm going to need another bite here, but I got to admit, to me, it was sort of a combination of sweet and almost malty in a way, just looking off this chart. I am not a foodie by any stretch of the imagination, as my family will tell you. And
No, but if you like whiskey, if whiskey people know about flavour, this is, I think, to me, one of the issues about the kind of Anglo-Saxon world is how much we've separated drink and food. That actually, it's really interesting if you do, because I'm mostly, I kind of got into whiskey through food, through knowing about food. If you give a whiskey tasting to people who know about food, they say different things than whiskey people, but they still really pay attention to the flavour. They don't generally like such extreme flavours as maybe whiskey drinkers do, but they still know about flavour. And there is no way that you don't know about flavour if you know about whiskey. Absolutely no way. It's just changing your language slightly, but you can tell the difference between one chocolate and another. And the same, if you just concentrate, same way you can tell the difference between one whiskey and another.
And this is my first experience with really good milk chocolate. I would say, and I want to go back to show this chart again, that it's obviously sweet. There's no salt in this one.
No
smokiness at all. Almost maybe a little bit of floral character to it. And then the aftertaste is just really nice and well balanced. There's a little bit of honey to it, a slight bitterness, but I would rate this one as either good or very good.
Good.
And
Duffy's is a really well respected maker. They're a really good whiskey maker. So what whiskey are you going to start off with trying this with?
Well, I had a glass of Aberfeldy 12 poured, and that doesn't go well at all with this one.
Why not?
Because the Aberfeldy 12 is rather sweet, very floral, very light, and I don't think it complements. Basically, it's overdoing the same flavors as the chocolate. I'm looking at the taste profile on the packaging, and this one has listed as floral chocolate with hints of hazelnuts, orange blossom, and allspice. And those are a lot of the same flavors I get in the Aberfeldy 12, so they don't really complement each other.
That is the massive key, I think, to tasting whiskey and chocolate. The very first time I did a whiskey and chocolate tasting informally, I was in the Pot Still pub in Glasgow, and I had some friends that like whiskey and like chocolate, and they just, I think we had, and I think it wasn't an Aberfeldy, but it was a kind of soft, kind of Speyside sort of whiskey from up there, and we tried that with some really good quality milk chocolate, and they all sat there going, no, this doesn't work.
I want to.
But what I'd like you to do,
go ahead,
is if you try it. Have you got, what are you going to try? Because I was going to say something like a Bruichladdich or even a Port Charlotte, but maybe a Bruichladdich.
I've got a Scarabus, which is from one of the milder Islay distilleries. Right. Hunter Lang does not say which one it comes from. I suspect Bunnahabhain, but I could be wrong about that. And they've never confirmed it, obviously, but that would be one of the lighter Islay ones. So let me try it with a sip of this now.
So try the lighter Islay one and see what you think. And when you say that it goes, tell me what you think is happening in your mouth.
Okay, a little whiskey first, and now the chocolate. Putting up some of our comments here while we're talking.
Yeah, Dave, high cocoa tent dark chocolate. I think the thing about high cocoa tent dark chocolate I've really noticed with craft chocolate is because it has so much better quality cocoa and it's been ground so much better, the tastes are really different. So there's a few different Cocoa Runners has quite a lot of chocolates that maybe have the same percentage. So you have like 80% that's just chocolate and then 20% sugar, and you can get a range of 80%, and they have really different tastes because the bean's different, the company making it's different, so that they'll grind the bean differently, they'll temper the chocolate differently, they'll just do something slightly different in their processing. In that respect, it's quite like whiskey, because in the end with whiskey, you know, especially with Scotch malt whiskey, is you're having a drink that's just malt, water and yeast, malted barley, water and yeast, nothing else. And if you go from a Lafroig to a Balvenie, they're a totally different taste. You don't get that huge bigger range of flavours if you had a load of 80% or 70% chocolate. from cocoa runners, but you do get really, really different flavours and tastes, which again I think is something that whiskey drinkers would be really interested in, especially as it doesn't break your bank.
Well, Dave Kuhn has.
Now you think a chocolate.
Go ahead.
No, Dave is saying about a chocolate that had some sea salt in it would complement a Bruichladdich Islay barley. Well, actually, we are doing a tasting at the Islay Festival with some Bruichladdich Islay barley. We're doing a tasting at their distillery, and we're actually using some chocolate called Om Nom Nom from Iceland. It's an Icelandic maker, and they've also put some black barley in one of their chocolates that we're probably going to use at the tasting.
Well, let's try out Dave's hypothesis here and see what happens, because I do happen to have the 2011 Bruichladdich Islay barley.
And you have you've got a Menachau. You've got a Menachau chocolate. What percentage is that, Ben?
63%. With cocoa nibs and sea salt.
So what you do with that is you'll get some texture in that in the Menachau, because the cocoa nibs are just fermented beans that they dry and ferment them, and they kind of ground them into the chocolate, so you get a different texture. Some people absolutely love that contrast. Some people don't like it. It's a really personal taste. And with a little bit of salt, I think it might work well with a Bruichladdich. The thing I found with Bruichladdich, my issue I had with a laddie was that I did once spend an evening and ended up just about finishing a quarter of a bottle, because I tried about 20 different chocolates and none of them went, because I needed a milk chocolate, a kind of milk chocolate with some kind of caramel notes went with Bruichladdich. Nothing dark. Couldn't find anything dark to go with it that day at all.
Oh, this has a snap to it.
You see? This is not dairy milk at all, Mark, is it?
Let's see if you can hear this. I don't know if you can hear the snap or not on the microphone, but let's try out Dave's hypothesis. The sea salt, cocoa nibs, and the one thing I'm noticing on these that I don't see on generic chocolate bars is an expiration date. Chocolate does go bad, doesn't it?
I think it's more they just have to put one, to be honest. I think because it doesn't have so many preservatives and so much, frankly, rubbish in it. It has really good quality ingredients. They don't last forever. You know, I mean, in the same way that I suppose if you opened a cheap bottle of wine, it kind of lasts longer than if you open a really good bottle of wine, because it's got stuff in it that'll keep it going in a way that really good quality wine doesn't. In that respect, once you've opened a bar of chocolate, you kind of should finish it within about 2 weeks. It's not like a bottle of whiskey that you can open it and leave it. So what do you think of that Menachau? So the difference with that one, as well as the Duffy, the bean came from Ecuador, and in Menachau, it's a maker in Madagascar, and all of their beans come from Madagascar.
And you can taste the difference between the two. Obviously, the darkness on this is... Mm-hmm. Oh, the aftertaste with the whiskey and the chocolate. With the aftertaste, the finish of the whiskey really works well with the chocolate.
So what do you think it does? What do you notice? Does it bring out any other notes in the Bruichladdich that you've not noticed before?
It brings out a little bit of the peatiness, I think, that you don't normally get. Some heather. Mm-hmm. The sea salt brings out more of the brine in the Bruichladdich, in the Islay barley.
Mm-hmm.
The texture on this chocolate is fantastic.
It's a Menachau are a really good chocolate maker. They're lovely. They're really good chocolate. The thing that what you're talking about now for me is when a whiskey and a chocolate go really well together. It brings out different notes in the chocolate. It brings out different notes in the whiskey. And the interesting thing about pairing is sometimes it's meh, like you got with the Duffy's chocolate and the Aberfeldy, that they didn't go together, even though it's a really good chocolate and a really good whiskey. And sometimes it can just make the whiskey almost taste like it's burned oak. It brings out so much of the charring from the oak that it just tastes burned. I mean, I did once at a chocolate fair. We were doing an event, and I was going around the chocolate makers with some whiskey, saying, okay, we need to get some whiskey that matches. I need to get some chocolate that matches with my whiskey. And they would give me something that I knew wouldn't work, and I'm going, okay, try this. And then they would give Then they would try their chocolate and their whiskey, and they would try their chocolate and my whiskey, and they'd go, "This is not good. Like, this is, my chocolate's horrible. I can't believe this." I said, "Okay, just try this chocolate. I think will go better." Then when they tried it, they'd be like, "I didn't even know those notes were in my chocolate. I really didn't ever appreciate quite that level of flavour in my own chocolate." So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the whiskey to be better and the chocolate to be better, and that's a good match.
Our friend Chris Ratcliffe wants to know, when tasting chocolate, how do you engage your sense of smell? The tasting wave we discussed earlier doesn't really account for smell in there, does it?
Well, the thing with the tasting is if you put the chocolate in your mouth and hold your nose, you don't taste very much. What you're noticing is the retronasal olfaction with chocolate. You're not getting. I mean, if you melted it in your hand, you would get a much stronger smell. But really, what you're getting is the taste and the kind of retronasal. So that the taste you get at the back once you have it in your mouth and it's starting to melt. That's when you really get the flavour. So that would be when you get the flavour, and then that's when you mix it with the whiskey.
I'm trying this again by itself without the whiskey, and the texture on the bottom of the bar from the cocoa nibs is just sort of a nice rough texture to it, but the chocolate itself is very rich and luscious and very sweet, with just that little bit of sea salt and almost a vegetal note to it.
The thing is, genuinely craft chocolate is a different ballgame. It's a different ballgame from Hershey's. And yes, the man, Mr. Hershey, must be spinning in his grave and now seeing what kind of things are happening to his chocolate, and also, seeing the good that the craft industry is doing. It really goes. The thing about it really going well is you can get really into different chocolate, like you're saying about the nibs. It turns out you are a person that really likes chocolate with nibs, so you can end up sitting there going through different chocolate with nibs and finding which one's your favourite and what kind of different textures you have with chocolate. Some people don't like nibs in their chocolate at all. They just prefer the pure texture of the chocolate. There's so much. I do think it's like whiskey. There's something for everybody in craft chocolate, that you will find things that you like that you didn't expect. And also it's that nuance, see the difference even in the texture of the chocolate of the Menacau, the way they make it compared to the texture of Duffy's, and just how those things really, really to me complement whiskey in general, because it's a very similar language. It's that sort of nuance of small differences.
We have another question from Chris Ratcliffe. Is dark chocolate like the peated whiskey of the chocolate world? Do people find it divisive?
Actually, in craft chocolate, what people find divisive is white chocolate, because it's made from cocoa butter and not the beans. That's the thing that's really the controversial thing in craft chocolate. But the thing about craft chocolate is it's so small that people haven't really had a chance to fight yet. It's one of those really small industries where everybody's still really nice to each other, so nobody's having big controversies, because they follow the same rules of buying in the beans, doing minimum processes, and selling the chocolate. That at the moment there's not been a big fight yet. Dark chocolate and sherry whiskey is often delicious, and there was somebody before who just said about the whiskey, about having Lagavulin 16 and
Mass
dark
Brothers.
Salted. That was it. Smoked salted dark chocolate. So we have a kind of sort of almost smoked chocolate for you to try, Mark. It's a chocolate called Solomon's Gold.
This one?
And they are a chocolate maker from New Zealand. And what they do is the beans that they buy in are all from Papua New Guinea. But the problem in Papua New Guinea is it's very, very humid. So before the farmers can dry the beans, they actually have to kind of dry them quite near fires because it's too humid for the beans to dry. So the chocolate isn't smoked and the bean isn't smoked, but it tastes slightly smoked. And you'll see it's only 7% more chocolate than the Menacau that you had, but it tastes completely different and the texture's completely different. It doesn't have any fruity flavours in it. I love it, but it's really different to the first two that you've tried.
I don't know if you can hear that snap as I was pulling the piece out.
You like that snap,
That
don't
snap
you?
is nice. I like that. I'm going to have to start listening for that more often. We'll put that back. So this is Solomon's Gold, 70% cocoa, organic artisan chocolate, and
Now try that with your Aberfeldy.
this is nice. And before I taste the Aberfeldy, there's a subtle smokiness to this. I get the smokiness on there, but the texture is very creamy.
It's not it's not a smoked chocolate, but it doesn't have peat the way Lagavulin has peat. It doesn't have smoke the way Liquid has smoke, but it's there, and it doesn't feel like it's an add-on. You don't feel like they've taken milk or they've melted chocolate and smoked underneath it.
Now there's a note of fresh berries that's coming out, like raspberries almost, that comes out in this one.
And what do you think of it with the Aberfeldy?
Well, let's try it and find out. Yeah, the allspice from the Aberfeldy and the orange blossoms and the notes we get off the Aberfeldy. There's a dog shaking the tripod. But the allspice and the orange blossom, the fruitiness of the Aberfeldy and the dried flowers really complements the dark chocolate in this well. That sort of subtle smokiness really sort of plays off of each other.
And if you try that smoked chocolate with Bruichladdich, not Bruichladdich, Port Charlotte. If you've got or if you've got a really peated.
I've got a Port Charlotte, heavily peated.
Yeah, try with the Port
Charlotte 10-year-old.
Port Charlotte and see what you think, because I want you to compare that to then if you have the white chocolate with the Port Charlotte and see what you think the difference.
Okay. And which one of these is the white chocolate?
It's Zotter. It said the Zotter white chocolate with cocoa. There's like a grey bar. It's like the square circle begins.
Is this the vegan one?
Yep. Okay. I think that's white chocolate with berries.
Okay.
Because rather than milk powder, I think they've used coconut milk in the.
Okay, chocolate. Got it. So let's try this now with the Port Charlotte. Love that Port Charlotte.
Doesn't everybody?
And to those who don't like it, great, more for us.
Exactly.
This actually kind of works.
Because the Solomon's Gold isn't incredibly smoky, because it's got a smoky touch as opposed to being real full flavoured smoke in your mouth. Between the chocolate selection and the whiskey selection, I really want to be in the room with Matt about now, Matt. Matt, so do I. Do you know, I am sitting in Lisbon because I'm at a friend's house and there is no whiskey in my house, and I am drinking Portuguese wine and Portuguese water because there's no whiskey, no chocolate in this house. So, would you now try the white chocolate? My wife supposedly doesn't like peated scotch, but a party she and a lady pharmacist have squandered with Port Charlotte to one corner of the room as their private bottle. Do you know, Bill, my mother says that she doesn't like peated whiskey. And once I had written my book, I wrote about in the book about how she doesn't like peated whiskey. And she told me the reason that she actually doesn't like peated whiskey was about 30 years ago. She was in a conference in Inverness, and a friend of hers managed to down about half a bottle of Lagavulin each, and were very ill the next day. And neither of them touched peated whiskey ever again. She can't even smell it over 20 years later because it takes her back to the morning after in Inverness.
Okay, now I want to confirm that this is what I'm supposed to be tasting because
I know. No, because there's another white. Is it not one that says it's white?
No, there's not one that says white.
There's two.
There's one that says 50% milk chocolate with date sugar.
Right, and what did that other one say? I must have said it might have not.
The label is in German, but it's wild berries and coconut bar with date sugar.
That was supposed to be a white one. That's fine. That'll be the lightest one that you have. So try that one. There should have been a white chocolate, but we must have made a mistake in the delivery. But that's a very light. That's a very light chocolate. That's a very low percentage of cocoa compared to most of the other ones.
This did not have as good a snap to it. But
no, because it doesn't have as much cocoa in it.
And as Tabitha Spirit Bomb points out, just give me a bottle of PC10 and a straw. And Christopher Malloy.
Yeah, my mother did that. I don't think that was such a good idea.
No. Well, the berries in this really come out.
Mm-hmm. So Zotter's a French company, and Zotter started doing chocolate in 1992. He was one of the very first people to do craft chocolate. I think he really wanted to get involved with cocoa with encouraging cocoa production properly, and then making the chocolate himself. So he's one of the first people ever to make craft chocolate. So he puts a lot of different things in his chocolate, like date sugar and coconut milk and all kinds of things. So see how that goes with Bruichladdich, because that'll be the kind of sweetest, softest chocolate that you've got.
It works pretty well. Just a split second here because I was actually tasting it against the Port Charlotte. Here we go against the Bruichladdich.
Let's see what you think.
Yeah, I get the smokier whiskey. It plays right off the berries well. Flavors tend to complement each other really nicely. Let's see. What other spirits does chocolate pair well with? Graham Fraser would like to know. He's guessing some dark rums. Or would the dark rum overpower the chocolate?
No, not necessarily. I think it depends on the chocolate. It does pair really well with dark rums. It pairs really well with whiskey. It can be hard. It can pair with gin, but it's actually quite a lot of work because you've got to offset the juniper in gin. With vodka, the kind of, the higher upper end vodka you need to have a much cleaner taste. So it's harder with vodka. It's probably genuinely at its best with whiskey. Although craft chocolate does pair really well with wine. But the thing with wine is that I don't think it pairs that well socially. Very few people think to open a bottle of wine and have some chocolate, whereas more people would, after dinner, more people would think about having whiskey or rum and chocolate after dinner. Also, maybe Armagnac and cognac. But again, the difference between, say, Armagnac and cognac and whiskey is you don't get the range of flavours in Armagnac and cognac that you get in whiskey. So there's an element where I think whiskey's the best one to pair it with because whiskey has the widest range of flavours that other spirits just don't have. Think if we brought back chocolate liqueurs. Well, actually, Spirit Bomb, we are trying to get, what you're saying is I think it might be good if we brought back chocolate liqueurs, but with craft chocolate and amazing whiskey. That is one of the things I'm trying to do. If I can get more whiskey drinkers into really good chocolate, at some point, some of the chocolate makers will realise there's something to be made in making their really good chocolates with some really good whiskey. That is, if you would buy more Cocoa Runners chocolate, we can persuade them to make some whiskey and chocolate.
We have this question from Chris Ratcliffe about do many cocoa growers also make chocolate? And at the other end, do companies buy ready-made blocks of chocolate for processing, blending, etc.? How do the folks who are making these chocolates get their cocoa and then process it and turn it into chocolate?
So they buy these craft chocolate makers buy beans directly from the farmer. So actually, if you look at others, about 5% of cocoa is grown for craft chocolate makers. 95% is generally grown for big commodity chocolate, and big commodity chocolate makers buy ready-made blocks of chocolate. So a lot of the time, the beans will just be all mixed together from any farm. They don't generally care about the quality of the beans. There is also another problem, Chris, which is there's child labour involved. There was a big news article on Channel 4 in the UK earlier this week about how it turns out Cadbury's are still essentially using child slave labour for some of their cocoa farms, even though they don't realise that, but they don't pay a lot of attention. And a lot of chocolatiers, what they do, and even a lot of chocolate makers do as well, is they just buy in bulk chocolate and then they just remelt it. So there's a difference between bean to bar and handmade chocolate. I've seen this with labels. I've started to become a real label freak. It's because when you learn about Scotch, Scotch is so heavily regulated that you as a consumer, you know what you're getting when you know how to read a label. You know exactly what you're getting. With chocolate, it can be really, really complicated. It's like, this is a beautiful handmade chocolate from this village and blah, 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 blah. And then you look on the back and it just says, handmade chocolate originally from Belgium. So all they've done is just buy in big commodity chocolate, remelted it and packaged it as handmade, because essentially they've melted it again and reshaped it. The craft chocolate that you get at Cocoa Runners and all of the chocolate that you're eating today is bean to bar. These people have to buy the beans, and they generally, they have to know what farm those beans came from, because they buy them direct. And this idea of direct trade is the thing that really makes a difference to the cocoa farmer and to the producer, because they know who these people are, and they know where they came from, they know how they grow their cocoa, and they give them a guaranteed price. So one of the reasons you pay more for your chocolate is that the supply chain, they get more money at the end of the day. It makes a massive difference. You've just Vosges hot chocolate smoke and stout caramel bars. Christopher Malloy, I have no idea if Vosges hot chocolate smoke and stout caramel bars are any good, or if they make their own chocolate, or if they're craft chocolate makers at all. I have no idea, but I'm sure you can tell Mark whether you enjoy them and what you think about them.
Yeah, Christopher, let us know what you think when you try those. I suspect if there's being sold on Amazon, it's probably not craft chocolate, but
you never know. They're not a company that I know. I mean, these, generally speaking, a lot of craft chocolate makers start off in their kitchen with lentil grinders, because they start off with kitchen processors. But the problem is to grind a bean can take anything up to like 60 hours, depending on how smooth you want the ground to be. And your kitchen processor will explode if you put it in for that length of time. And somebody discovered that Indian lentil grinders were the thing that they can go on forever. So they were the thing that everybody, when they start off small, they use before they then maybe buy their own stone grinders, or when they've got a slightly bigger company. But none of these companies are very big. I mean, I think that, to me, that's where chocolate went wrong, is it became such a big commodity, in a way that even whiskey, when it's owned by big international companies, it's still made the same way. There's nothing more or less artisanal than a Diageo distillery, than a non-Diageo distillery. The whiskey is still made in the same way. And you can go from a really big whiskey company to a really small distillery. If you look at somebody like Simon Erlanger, that worked for years at Glenmorangie, when they opened up the Harris distillery to do the Herat whiskey, they asked him to come on board. Nobody's leaving Hershey's or Cadbury's to go and start doing craft chocolate. Nobody. The people, if you see in craft chocolate, they're chefs or they're people who are interested in flavour. They've never been a big person. They've never been a big important person in Nestle or at Hershey's. Which it's a shame, because it's made chocolate this really cheap, nasty commodity when it didn't need to be.
Dave Kuhn says he gets some big dark chocolate notes in Glenallachie 12. Let's draw on your whiskey experience for a bit now. What would give us dark chocolate notes in a whiskey? Is it the wood? Is it the barley? What's the combination that gives us those dark chocolate notes?
I would think those cocoa notes will come from the wood, in the same way that sometimes when you get a slight coconut note, that's also from the wood. I think any kind of cocoa notes will be from the wood, because it wouldn't make sense for it to come from the barley. And it might also be, although it might be the toast, if you get that kind of toast that could almost be cocoa, that kind of real roast flavour, it might be the barley, but I would say 90% that it would be the wood most of the time.
And Chris Ratcliffe wants to know, what new trends are getting you excited in the chocolate world?
I think more people just being aware. I think really more people being aware, and I find there's similarity how the chocolate makers get really geeked out about chocolate the way whiskey people do. I find really interesting. There's a guy, Friesholm, who's based in Denmark, and he gets obsessed with like second fermentations, and he gets really obsessed with the DNA of a cocoa bean. In the same way that like when you're all at festivals, if you're at Speyside or you're at Isla, and you're all whiskey people are all in a crowd, and they're all talking about fermentation and yeast and what's going on and what barrel and they like the 12-year-old of this one. Oh, have you tried this cask finish? Have you tried that one? Oh, I don't like cask finishes, and those debates go on all night. Well, the thing that gets me excited is seeing chocolate makers do exactly the same thing all together in one room about chocolate. It is really. It's brilliant. It's really, really, really entertaining to watch. And, I think it's the kind of thing that if you like whiskey, you would like craft chocolate people. They're basically our people.
A lot of similarities between them, especially on when you look at the chart like this, like the flavor chart.
The flavor wave.
The flavor wave. This looks almost, you could easily turn a flavor wheel into something like this for Scotch whiskey.
Well, we're going to, because we're doing some events at the Speyside Whisky Festival, and what we're going to do, we're doing them with Barry Smith, who is a professor at UCL, and he is a professor of philosophy and taste, and he's very interested in how people experience taste. So we're doing whisky and chocolate tastings, but we're not doing them prescribed. We're not going to say this chocolate goes with this whisky. What we're going to do is try and get people to mark down and write down and explain how they taste the chocolate, how they taste the whiskey, and then how they taste them both combined, so that we can have a much better idea of what people experience with them both together, for things that match and things that don't, and why they match and why they don't, and why some people think they do, why some people think they don't. That's what we're trying to just kind of put it all together to see exactly what happens. The thing I think, again, with the difference between craft chocolate and a Hershey's bar or a dairy milk, is you get that aftertaste, you get that nuance. I do have to tell you, now that you've probably had about 6 different craft chocolates, you will really notice when you have a normal bar, you'll be like, this is just pure sugar. I actually get quite upset now, because so many chocolatiers just use bulk buy in chocolate to make their chocolate truffles. And so they make this really beautiful truffle with a beautiful filling, but the cover is just really naff chocolate. And somebody, it was about 3 months after I started doing some work with cocoa runners, and somebody that I know was in her house, and it was her birthday, and her husband had given her these amazing sort of French truffles, and I tried one. I was like, oh, this is amazing, I love this chocolate, I know how expensive it is, oh, you're so lucky to have one. And I tried it, and it was awful. It was really terrible, because the chocolate had no foretaste, it had no aftertaste, it just was sugar. It just felt like it was just sugar and cheap cocoa solids. And I sent a message to Spencer, who runs Cocoa Runners. I was like, I hate you. I don't like this chocolate anymore. He just sent me a message going, "Welcome to our world. That's what it's like." And but at the same time, it does it opens an entire world of straightforward chocolate, the way that it should have been, and the way that whiskey is.
We have a question from Dave Kuhn, who you've referred to chocolatiers as the folks who make the chocolate. But is there a name for a chocolate expert the way wine experts are called sommeliers? Or is the term chocolatier used for them as well?
No, chocolatier is for people who make chocolate truffles. So they buy in bulk chocolate and then they add flavors to them and stuff and maybe like stuff them with things. If you've got like a ganache, or if you've got like a Turkish delight, or some people you get lime chocolate truffles. So that's a chocolatier. There isn't a word for a chocolate expert as far as I know. But then is there a big word for a whiskey expert? Like a sommelier?
A nerd.
Well, chocolate geek then. It would be chocolate geek pretty much. Craft chocolate geek would be the one. And often, and as opposed to whiskey, they don't all have beards. There's probably, in terms of the beard ratio, I think there's more whiskey nerds with beards than there are chocolate nerds with beards.
Now, Tabitha Spirit Bomb wants to know what you thought of the Japanese Kit Kat chocolate bar that was aged in Lafroig barrels for 6 months. First word that comes to my mind is gimmick, but...
Not a lot. Would be the best way to put it. Would be not an awful lot. I mean, it's one of those things that people do because it brings in publicity. They're a big company, Kit Kat. It gets them talked about in Japan. I don't think it's a bad idea if you know what they're doing. I mean, if they did work with a really small craft company, it doesn't bring them a lot of publicity.
But do work with a whiskey brand that's popular in Japan, it'll get them all the publicity in the world.
Exactly. I mean, and you got to do what you got to do. You resemble that Peter to Mark. Oh, Bill, believe me, I spend a lot of time in the Pot Still in Glasgow and in the Bon Accord in Glasgow. I know my beards.
And Dave said the Bowmore 15 has a lot of chocolate notes, and that's what he was trying to think of. And that's the one I remember years ago at a party getting people to try the Bowmore with a bite of dark chocolate. And people going, wow, I never thought that you could pair whiskey and chocolate at the time. And then I sort of fell away from it. But
well, you imagine the Bowmore 15 with every single chocolate that you've tried, and you can imagine the difference, what different flavour notes you'd get in that Bowmore chocolate with every single chocolate that you've just tried today. And how that would make the taste of the Bowmore change.
And Chris Ratcliffe, one of his favorite chocolates is the Co-op dark chocolate with orange oil. Is flavored chocolate an interesting category and an abomination unto the nib, the way that flavored whiskeys are an abomination to the whiskey connoisseur?
No, some of the whiskey some of the chocolate companies do. Some of the craft chocolate companies do make a flavored chocolate, like they have. The one you just tried, the Zotter, they put some berries in. They also, I think Atkinson's who run a co-op in Madagascar. Bert Atkinson, he quite often flavors his chocolate with spices that are growing around the cocoa farm. So he has I think it's a white chocolate with rosy pepper. The Atkinson's chocolate that you have is a Brazilian cocoa whipped from a farm in Bahia on the northeast. Yep. So Atkinson's was one of the big kind of. He was kind of almost like the Johnny Walker or the Alexander Walker of chocolate. And his father was a diplomat in Madagascar, so he decided that cocoa farming had to get itself into a better state. So he started a cocoa farm there and then started making his own chocolate. And now they also have help run a co-op in northern Brazil. So that chocolate's 75%. So again, it's just that if you compare that to Solomon's Gold, they're very, very similar ingredients, but quite different tastes.
So
Probably actually they've got the same ingredients, but quite different tastes.
So let's take a little nibble of this one. And this is the Atkinson's.
So I like that. I don't mind that co-op chocolate with orange oil. If I've not had chocolate for a few days and I have that co-op chocolate with the orange oil, I quite like it until I then have a craft chocolate and I then realise why craft chocolate's much better than the co-op chocolate with orange oil. But for example, the Menacau that you had earlier, the Menacau has got quite strong berry notes in it, and that's just from the cocoa. There's no addition to that at all.
I would like to.
And what do you think of the Atkinsons?
I like it. I want to try this one with a bourbon. With the Baker's, I've got the Baker's single barrel 7-year-old. This was at 53.5% ABV. While I'm trying this, Graham Fraser says he enjoyed your book. Do you have any new titles lined up that you're working on?
I am at the moment trying to write a novel in Portugal without much success. This is why I am in Lisbon right just now. I had pitched to do a very similar book to Chasing the Dram, but going around Ireland, but I was unsuccessful in my pitch. No publisher wanted it. So I am at the moment trying to finish a novel, and I'm about 3 years too late. So don't ask me how that's going, Graham, because to be fair, in the past few months, it's a lot better than it has been. But a lot of people I know, because of COVID, are actually very late with their books, so I don't feel so bad. You tried 100% cocoa chocolate from Hotel Chocolate Spirit Bomb. Well, there is 100%. Mark does have 100% chocolate there with him that he can try and see what he thinks. So that is Connexions. That is a woman called Jennifer, and I can't remember her surname. She is an American Ecuadorian, and she moved back to Ecuador. And what she's trying to do is make cocoa farming for a lot of farmers in Ecuador viable, so that they don't end up leaving their farms and moving to the city. And that Connexions chocolate is 100% cocoa. There's no other ingredient in it at all apart from cocoa beans.
I've never had a 100% cocoa before.
You either like 100% or you don't. It's really different on the mouth because there's no creamy notes.
So this would be the peated whiskey of chocolates.
It is totally the peated whiskey of chocolate. Because the thing about 100%, again, is once you get into 100%, they can all taste quite different because of the way they've been, the bean, the way it's been roasted, the way that it's been ground, the way it's been tempered. There is nothing, but it's not like other chocolate. It is 100% chocolate. There is nothing that offsets it. And it takes longer to melt in your mouth. By
the way, the Atkinsons worked really well with the bourbon. The spices in the bourbon played really well off of the chocolate. So let's give this a try.
Yeah, I thought they would. The 100%?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can feel, not necessarily in a bad way, but you can feel like everything's been sucked out your cheeks when you've got 100% chocolate in your mouth. You think 100% is the Campbelltown of chocolate. That is a good way of putting it. It is probably like the Campbelltown. Is it the peated or the Everclear? I don't think it's the Everclear. I'm not sure what Everclear is, Bill, but I think no. And see what you think that goes with.
And it goes with the bourbon because the bourbon overpowers the lack of flavor, the lack of creaminess or the lack of texture in the chocolate.
The lack of creaminess, I mean, I think there is a flavour in 100% cocoa, but because it's bitter, it takes quite a lot of getting used to. It is in that respect like a peated whiskey, in that if you've never had peated whiskey before, until you get used to it, it's all you taste. 100% chocolate can be like that. You have to have tried a few, and you've got a reasonable sized bar there. If you have a bit, and then have a bit of whiskey, and have the next few weeks, you'll start to feel more notes in it. It's not a kind of great beginner's chocolate.
No, it reminds me almost of baking chocolate.
Slightly. I can see what you mean, because it's not so sweet.
Yeah.
Because it's got no added sugar at all.
see.
No.
Dave Kuhn says he has a set of little Anthonberg chocolate bottles with the famous grouse and Jim Beam and other things inside. And they make a set with all the Diageo whiskeys in it. Tempted to order that after this live session.
To be honest, Dave, you're really better getting better chocolate and just doing it yourself. Because you'd be better having chocolate and whiskey yourself than kind of having someone else who's not necessarily brilliant whiskey. Having someone's not necessarily brilliant chocolate with whiskey. Get your own chocolate, get your own craft chocolate, and have it with whiskey that you like. And it also then means you can have one whiskey and 4 chocolates, and it gives you much more taste. In a way that if you've got one chocolate liqueur, you've got the chocolate they make you have and the whiskey inside.
Well, this has been a lot of fun.
I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Had a lot of fun tasting these chocolates. Thank you for sending them over, and thank you for doing this, Rachel. I really appreciate the time today.
You're welcome.
That's our Happy Hour live webcast from last Friday night, April 8th, with whiskey and chocolate educator Rachel McCormack. This week I'll be joined by Starward Whiskey founder David Vitale. His team's Australian whiskeys took home 15 gold medals this week at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. We'll start at 5 p.m. New York time on the WhiskeyCast YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Twitter, and Twitch. Hope you can join us. Thanks again to Dewar's and Redbreast, our presenting sponsors, along with the Dalmore, Writer's Tears, Sagamore Spirit, Mortlock, Catoctin Creek, and Scarabus for their support of WhiskeyCast. If you have comments on this or any of our podcasts or live webcasts, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at WhiskeyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. WhiskeyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.